And now let's finally move to the third e5, which is a very, very principled continuation and very aggressive one. To me, the most logical move, actually, in the position. Those types of positions remind me very much the French defense. The difference is that, with a pawn on e6, you have the eternal problem of this white color bishop on c8. So how to activate it or exchange it if possible, but usually it takes time and lots of efforts to manage it. Here, if Black plays bishop f5, which is the main continuation in this position, then situation is slightly different. Of course, it's very, very important for Black to manage to get in this pawn structure, to manage to get his bishop out, into the game, to this diagonal f5, b1 h7 diagonal. The differences, the minuses are that it's, of course, Black will anyway. One of the main ideas in this position, strategical ideas for Black, is to get c5. So then it means that Black is losing a tempo. So because he had played c6 earlier and then c5, which makes it more difficult, to manage just tactically. And also, since the bishop is away somewhere on g6 very often, then it also makes it more difficult to get c5, because White has some active possibilities, to try to play c4 and so on. I mean, the bishop somewhere on g6 is not taking part in the defense of the queen side, so to say. Also, the difficulties, Black's difficulty is that it's, that is actually quite similar to the French defense, that it's not easy to develop all his pieces. Yeah, so at least his bishop is becoming very active, perfectly good piece, the white scalar bishop. But then how to castle? Yeah, so Black needs quite some time to manage e6, and sometimes it goes via bishop knight e7, and knight should get out somewhere, not quite clear how exactly, then bishop e7, and then maybe only castle. So castling usually is not easy for Black here, and sometimes Black plays with the king on the center for quite a long period of time. Or even there are some variations where Black makes long castles, but most often what happens is that Black king stays on e8 for quite many moves, and then of course due to this, White has lots of aggressive and attacking possibilities. Yeah, because the king is, as we all know, it's always better to have it hidden somewhere on g8, in general, in all openings. So all in all, that is a general consideration. Those are general considerations, but there are lots of different concrete lines, which I'm going to show you now. I think that at least for today, Black is doing fine here. Of course, White has a lot of different interesting actually options, but no real advantage anywhere. But the position is extremely complicated and very, very complex, strategical, tactical. White is actually, most of the time it's White who is choosing the type of play. So White has quite a wide choice of different concepts in this position. But again, so far I will try to show you. So I think it's a very rich position, and definitely playable for both sides. So it depends on your preferences, if you like this type of game with either Black or White. Or not. If not, maybe you shouldn't play it. But if you like, you can definitely play it, so to say, all your life. There is enough of content in this position. But before we move into bishop f5, which is the main continuation, I would like to show you the c5 move, which, by the way, I've played myself. I think I beat Alexei Shirov with black in 2000, we can say 2001 with this move. It is, quite dubious. So you see, basically it is a French defense. Yeah, if you put the pawn on a6, then it's a French defense. Of course, it looks like black is just tempi down, but the main point is that now playing c3 and, playing in the same fashion as in this third e5 line variation against French defense is already not dangerous, because black can manage to get his bishop out. Let's say knight f3 and cd4, or immediately bishop g4, and then black is getting his bishop out, e6, and is having a good game. So that is the difference. Therefore, white should probably try to to use it as most of the time in this 35 variation in a more aggressive and tactical way, which is trying to play d takes c5. Actually, knight f3 is an interesting move further here, which starts to become popular. If you are as a playing white against this c5 line, if you are not so happy with d takes c5, then knight f3 you can try to check. It's an interesting move, rather fresh, rather new. And the idea is that after knight c6, white, I think, as I understand, wants to take on c5, and then is trying to protect this pawn. Let's say after e6, I guess the idea is to play bishop e3 and to try to keep this pawn. But black has bishop g4 move and bishop b5. There is some theory here, not totally clear if it's better for white or not, but at least considers to be a bit dangerous for black. But it doesn't look like things are very clear in this variation, to me at least. And c takes d4 is the most logical move, and now queen takes d4. That is knight c6, queen f4. So this position is becoming fashionable, I would say, nowadays. I guess, again, the reason is because I guess computers, they like this kind of play with white. Otherwise, it looks a bit strange to play queen takes d4, queen f4. But anyways, you can analyze it, and I'm sure it's playable with both colors. I don't think it's going to be such a terrible problem for black. But anyways, definitely it's an interesting direction also if you are white. So knight f3 is an option, but normally the main move is dc5. Now e6. Knight c6, it's possible to start with knight c6 with the idea, as I've mentioned already, to play knight f3, bishop g4. But after knight c6, the old theory goes bishop b5, e6, bishop e3. So white is trying to hold on this pawn. Knight e7, trying to go knight f5, something like this. c3, knight f5, bishop d4, bishop d7, and it's still, the theory goes on and on. There is no clear verdict, as I understand, if white is better here or black finally manages to get enough play for the pawn. So that wouldn't be such a big problem. But I think lately, as I understand, there is this f4 move, which is very popular, and again, it seems that it's posing quite a lot of problems for black. So if you manage to, to find something against f4, then knight c6 move is definitely playable. Otherwise, for white players, I would advise to study f4 because for the moment, statistics is quite overwhelming in white's favor here, and so far black is not able to find a way to get a decent game here. That's why e6 is a much more popular move. And here, the idea is that, let's say, if now white is trying to protect this pawn, then knight d7, black can take it back easily. So after e6, well, usually white is trying to make to get this set up: knight f3, bishop d3, castles, a3, and the question is exactly what is the move order. Quite, I would say, tricky move order is to start with a3, even though I think it leads to the same, more or less. Otherwise, what else? Knight f3, bishop takes c5, bishop d3, knight c6, castle. Well, that is the most logical play. And this position is strategically, it's a typical French defense position, and strategically rather dangerous for black, as I've already mentioned in one of my lessons about French defense, that this type of position, black is risking to get under attack. Once he castles short, which probably is going to happen at some point. So one of the strategical ideas to try to get f6, just to get some, play in the center. But the problem is maybe here it's a bit too early because white is much better developed. So I guess I think white is better after both queen e2 or just takes and c4. Also, I want to draw your attention to this idea, a very typical idea in this structure, which is trying to stop e5, because black, of course, otherwise would like to push his e-pawn, and here it's much more difficult. And then whatever you do, d takes c4, then you have a e6 weak pawn. If you play d4, then after knight e4, white has full control on the white squares in the center. So here white is having a very comfortable game. That's why after castles, black is playing knight e7, and white can try to play a3, but then it's better to do it earlier. And otherwise, well, normally white just tries to develop his pieces. There is one way of playing is to put bishop on f4 and to g3. Another is to play rook e1. Let's say black is playing knight g6, followed by castle. And one of the main ideas for black in this position is sooner or later to play f6. It's hard to say if white has any opening advantage here. It pretty much depends on tempis in this position. Depends on if white manages to keep control on the center. I mean, to protect the e5 pawn and to find a good reaction against f6, which is going to come. But it's not so clear. It's definitely playable for black, this position. And otherwise, a3 is maybe more tricky, so to say, because now I think knight c6 is more accurate than bishop takes c5. Of course, it's a temptation to take quickly with a bishop the pawn, but then b4, and it just gives white some additional options. For instance, bishop e7 already, which is in some lines actually a good retreat, just trying to play f6, but now queen g4 seems to be a big problem. So, and after g6, knight f3, let's say h5, queen f4, white is just better. So bishop has to retreat to b6 here. And now also, of course, knight f3 would lead probably to the main line. That wouldn't make much difference. But queen g4 actually is quite a dangerous move again now. And now knight e7 probably is still, black is still okay, but maybe, I mean, I think that better to go first knight c6 just to avoid this additional option of queen g4, because here theory one option is to take on g7, take on h7, bishop d4 now, and black takes back on e5, knight f3, bishop f6. Black is pawn down, but he has better development and potential initiative in the center. So according to the theory, here black is doing fine. And another option is knight f3 here, and then knight g6, bishop d3. Looks quite dangerous. This queen on g4 is quite active, for instance. Or probably it's difficult to castle now because all sorts of h4, h5 ideas, or also queen h5 followed by knight g5 can be very dangerous. But also it's not that clear. Knight c6, bishop b2, h5. I think that's how they play here. Queen g3, knight c7. And also not, maybe black is finally doing okay here. So, but all in all, I believe knight c6 is simpler to start, because now the point is after b4, there is a5, very unpleasant move a5. So probably white's best is anyway to put the knight on f3, bishop takes e5, and then we get to this, I would say, tabia. Then you can start with bishop d3, or maybe b4 is, I would advise you, because if bishop e7, here again f6, bishop b2, probably white is better, having control in the center, so probably bishop b6 has to be played, let's say bishop b2. f6 is actually not losing. It's not so bad according to computer, maybe even holding miraculously, but very, very risky. I wouldn't advise you to play f6 here. So usually knight g7, black is playing bishop d3, knight g6. And this is, I would say, a tabia. Well, you need to analyze it with either color, white or black, if you want to play this variation. I think it's an important position. So white has a choice of playing g3, and then probably, if castle, queen e2, knight d2. So for the moment, keeping the king in the center and maybe having in mind h4, h5 ideas, but black will definitely play very soon f6. Anyways, but more classical, I would say, way of playing is castles, rook e1. And now black has to really hurry with f6, because white just wants to continue his development. Knight d2, he also has ideas c4. Black doesn't have much play in this position otherwise, so f6 is a very critical move. EFGF, as dangerous as it looks, but now you see that black is preparing the center advance with e5. Again, as you already know, c4 is the way to stop it. And let's say knight f4, bishop f1, and black has some moves like e5 or d takes c4 here. I think there were some games, and white was pressing a bit, but I'm not sure if he's really better in this position. So all in all, what can I say about c5? It's a playable variation. Of course, bishop f5 is more solid and probably objectively more sound, but there is, 5 times more theory after bishop f5 than after c5. So if you're playing Caro Kann with black, having it as a surprise weapon makes sense. It's not a bad line, c5. There is no clear refutation. But also, I'm sure that if you prepare well, if you work a lot on with white on this e5 line, I'm sure that c5 will not be a problem. So white will manage to find some ways to fight for opening advantage here, which is much more difficult to manage after third bishop f5. So bishop f5, and now white has a huge wide choice of possible setups. I will try to briefly go through most of them, at least the most logical moves, and to give you an idea what is considered to be the best response for black, and what is the problem for white in each of those setups, and what is a potential problem for the black player. And I'll try to give you my opinion on all of those moves, so which I consider more dangerous or potentially dangerous, or which are probably rather empty, so to say, in my opinion. So let's try to to investigate this extremely complex position with a huge amount of theory in a limited amount of time. Of course, you will have to make some more work on it, check the games, and analyze it with engines, but also play quite a lot, because positions are complicated, and you need also certain practical experience to get a better feeling of what is going on here. But all in all, I think the first and the most important maybe step is to understand the directions. nowadays in this vast amount of theory. So you need a certain guideline, certain understanding of what is going on and why this or that line is played and what are the nuances of each of the lines. So that I will try to give it to you, like in any other openings after e4. So here, well, the most, I would say, simple move is bishop d3. Yeah, that's quite logical, just to change the bishop. E6, that shouldn't be too dangerous. I mean, clearly, you will see there is a h4 line. So once h4, h5 is included, all those, quite many of those variations, including bishop d3, becoming more dangerous because of g5 square, which white can, quite often put the bishop there or later the knight. So all in all, if you already want to play bishop d3, then I would advise you to do it after h4. Here, well, Black is just playing some normal moves. Very often he has this maneuver queen a5 check, queen a6, trying to change queens, which would definitely be in his favor, or otherwise he just wants to play c5, knight c6. I don't think there are any problems here in this variation for Black. Then, well, there is a number of setups, which is when white is trying to make use of the fact that bishop is on f5, so trying to attack this bishop. I'm going to show it to you later. Then, of course, the main line is knight f3, bishop e2, e6, bishop e2, which is just, well, development. White is developing and then, trying to do something according to what his opponent is going to do. Black has some options here, but that we will analyze a bit later. Then instead of knight f3, there are some ideas. Let's start with positional ideas. So one of it is to try to put bishop on e3. Let's say c3. Then white's idea of the setup is to play bishop e3, knight d2, f4, knight gf3, bishop e2, and then to play, well, just to have a control in the center and, to try to use in a slow positional manner his space advantage. E6, bishop e3. Well, first of all, it's not totally clear if this position, even if white manages his objective, finally developing knight f3, knight bd2, if he really has an advantage, because black can always try to put sooner or later h5, and block the position pretty much, is extremely solid, but still white maybe can be slightly better there. That's why I think that queen b6 actually is a very direct way of playing, and I think it considers to be a problem for white in this position, because it's now he cannot really manage to get his setup. The problem is that in case of b4, then a5 comes, and you have a problem with the b4 pawn. b3 is very weakening. Yeah, it's really not an option, because then all this flank is becoming weak, and well, maybe black can already even simply play c5 followed by knight c6 or some other moves. I mean, b3 usually is not an option in this variation. Same goes for like queen c1. I guess black would just play c5 simply, and knight c6, a very healthy play, enough to equalize. So usually white is playing knight d3, queen b3 here, and then knight d7, knight d2, and here I think there was an important game. After that game, this variation with bishop e3, c3 lost its popularity. It was Grishuk Leko. I think they played somewhere in 2001 or this, plus minus 1 or 2 years. And you can find this game in database. And I think that, very nice way of playing for Leko found. He went f6, f4, and now g5. A very nice move, immediately starting to break in the center. And I think black is doing fine here. And that this is probably the reason why this c3, bishop e3 is not very fashionable nowadays. Then another idea is to start with bishop e3. So in case of e6, white wants to get knight d2. So, and then only later on maybe to play c3. and finally achieving this setup which he wants to achieve if he is playing bishop e3 variation. But then again, queen b6, I think, is a very principal move, and here things are more complicated. Not that simple for black, but still, I think, according to theory, black is doing fine. Now, again, well, b3 is not an option usually in this variation. Then knight d2, seemingly interesting pawn sacrifice, but after queen b2, queen takes a2 simply. Rook takes b7, a6. Again, according to theory and computers, white doesn't have enough for the pawn. Therefore, queen c1 is played, e6, and now you need to know some variations, some nuances in this position. For instance, the idea is that if knight d2, then c5 comes. That is important. So this is the point of black's play, to get quickly c5, knight f3, knight c6, and if c3, let's say bishop g6, followed probably by knight h6, knight f5. Here black is doing fine because queen on c1 is quite passive. Then another interesting idea for white is to try to play knight f3. Again, black wants to play c5, and now knight c3. So here I think that knight c6 is supposed to be the best move. And after dc5, bishop c5, queen c5, knight b5, that is an idea of white. And now I don't know if it's the only option, but actually king f8 is a good move. You see quite often here in this variation of after e5, bishop f5, black actually leaves his king in the center. Because his position here strategically is very sound. Actually, he's strategically at least equal, or maybe even slightly better. So, of course, it would be even better to castle. But since it's not possible, still king f8 is okay. I mean, this, because the position is pretty closed in its nature, it's difficult for white to make use of this king, which is not castled yet, and very often it will slowly make this so-called artificial castle, and he will manage to connect rooks. Let's say c3, knight e7, and black is doing well. He wants sometimes to play bishop e4 here, so no problem at all. Maybe the best try for white is to play c4. This is, by the way, what Kasparov once played himself. This position is very complicated, very complex, and but pretty double-edged. I wouldn't say that white has advantage here, but it's playable for white. So knight d7, and again, in this variation, of course, you can always play kind of solid moves just by general considerations with black, and probably you will not get into too bad position, but it's better to know some concrete variations also in certain concrete details in each line. So for instance, here knight d7 is supposed to be the best, because if knight c3, black has knight takes e5 trick all of a sudden, with the idea that after d, black has d4 move, and black is doing well after knight takes e5, probably better already. That's why on knight d7 usually white is playing knight f3, and now f6 is supposed to be a good move. Black starts to immediately to fight with white center, because in general has a nice development, solid structure, and and this queen on c1, pawn on c4, white is a bit not very harmonical, the setup of white for them at the moment. So f6, I think that is supposed to be the best line for black, even though there are other options as well. But probably here black is doing fine. So we see those c3, bishop e3 setups are at the moment popular some 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but slowly but surely black managed to find ways to counter it. So now it's not very fashionable. Then another very strange idea is knight d2, e6, knight b3. Looks really strange, but it has some point. I mean, basically, though this is a typical idea in general for white in the main line, and you will see White is quite often doing that. So he wants to stop c5, which is black's main strategical idea in this position. But here it's, black is probably doing fine. Knight d7, knight f3, h6, for instance. It's always a useful move. Bishop e2. So now black can play knight e7 and get to all those lines which we are going to consider after knight f3, e6, bishop e2. But it seems that c5, here he can already play c5, and that's maybe why white should rather start with knight f3, bishop e2, and only later, when black's knight gets to e7, then already try to maneuver his knight to b3, because here c5, I think it's equalizing. After dc5, bishop c5, taking on c5, bishop e3, knight d7, followed by knight e7, and black has, white has two bishops, but black's white square bishop is very powerful, and e5 pawn is a bit vulnerable, so it seems that black is doing very fine here. And now let's consider the move c4, which I can also call a positional way of playing, but frankly, I'm in general, as a concept, I'm not a big fan of this idea, because in a way white is attacking the d5 pawn, the center, but the center is extremely well protected, black center, so I don't see actually too much sense in it. I think black is doing perfectly fine here. I don't think there is any danger in this move. Then already better, if you already decide to play c4, then I would advise you to start with h4, and then on h5, which is the main move for black, then already to play c4. It will be a better version, even though still I believe black is fine there. But immediately c4, e6, let's say knight c3. I actually like the idea of playing bishop b4. A little bit strange to give up this bishop, to exchange it for the knight, but then at least black has a very quick development, knight e7, and then castle. Very often he gets c5. I think black is fine after bishop b4, but even a normal solid way of playing knight e7 must be okay. I don't know, white is usually playing something like this, bishop e3, knight d7, knight f3. I don't see, frankly, what is the big deal, what is the big plan for white. Let's say black can always play h6, also dc4, followed by bishop c4, knight b6, must be okay. So I don't believe in c4, frankly. And then now we move to another concept, when white is trying to to make use of bishop f5, to try to bother this bishop as quickly as possible. There are different ways of doing it. Those are very aggressive concepts. One of it, the most, of course, simple is just immediately to attack the bishop playing g4, but I don't think it's a good idea. First of all, even black can move the bishop back to d7, followed by e6, and then h5. Very often he will get counterplay with h5, and then e6, c5, so I'm not quite sure white has anything here, but I think even simpler is bishop e4, very important to include f3, and now bishop g6. And usually white's idea is to try to play h4, h5, and e6. Otherwise, black's next move would be e6, and he will just be probably better. The whole play doesn't make sense, white's play. So e6, the idea is to sacrifice a pawn, and in case of fe, black will have some serious issues with development. A very typical also idea in this variation. But here I think queen d6 is a very good move. And if bishop takes f7, and I don't know, black has just development advantage, and to me it looks like he's just fighting for advantage, or maybe he's already better. So I don't think g4 is a good idea. And then there is knight c3 move. That is very serious. That was for a very long time the main line for white, and though the idea is black normally, of course, plays e6, and now g4. Well, otherwise, there is no point to put the knight on c3. So the idea is g4, bishop g6, and knight g2. Of course, I mean, playing h4 doesn't make much sense because black is in time to play h5 here. But the whole point of white's idea is to play knight e2 now. And now he wants to play h4, h5, knight f4, knight f4 followed by h4. And of course, h5 is already not so good because of knight f4. So he's kind of running after this bishop on g6. Well, there are different ways of playing for black. I mean, I think that there's more than one way to meet it, you know, for black. But I think c5 is the most principal. It's very sharp. You need to know quite some direct force variations, but it seems that for quite a long time already white cannot really find any advantage here. Even quite often white can really be in danger of being worse because his play is very committing, you know, the g4 move and so on. He's weakening his position. So c5 is the most principal move. There are many other options. For instance, f6 is a kind of safe option because after knight f4 then black can always play bishop f7. But here white has h4, fe, and maybe even h5 first, bishop f7, d5, and knight d7, f4. And this position strategically is quite dangerous for black because his bishop on f7 is not great, and white gained quite a lot of space on the king side. So if white will manage to just to finish his development, he will probably be simply better. But black has some counter chances here, playing queen b6, and the position is still not totally clear. I think normally white is trying to play knight d4 here, c5, knight f3, like this, knight e7. Maybe tactically black is okay and he will manage to create counterplay, but strategically it's dangerous. So, but still f6 can be checked and probably would be checked deeper if there would be a need for it. But I think that black has easier ways to play. Well, a very solid move is knight d7. That is pretty solid, and the idea is that after h4, I think knight f4, white is usually not in time because c5 is very strong, breaking the center. So h4 and then simply h6. Let's say bishop e3, knight e7. If knight f4, always bishop h7. It's perfectly playable for black. I think position is rather unclear, and if you, as with black, if you don't want to study force lines, I think it's a perfectly valid option. But that would probably not be a reason why your opponent, white player, would not play this line. I think the reason is c5, and here play gets very direct, extremely sharp. But again, in the current state of theory, white has nothing here, and even, as I've mentioned already, can get worse sometimes. So what are the moves? Bishop e3 and h4. Well, h4 is the most aggressive move, but now black plays h5, knight f4, bishop h7. Okay, he's giving up this pawn on h5, knight takes h5, knight c6. But of course, yeah, white spent a lot of tempest taking this pawn, and again, it's just an h pawn, not a central one. And white has quite some problems with his center. So very sharp position, but black has a lot of counterplay here. For instance, if bishop b5, black can just go knight e7. Usually white takes dc5, and now bishop takes e5. Very important move to know. I mean, not to be afraid to give up the second pawn on g7, because after knight takes g7 check, king f8, knight h5, d4, according to theory, black is already better, and this is approved by machines. That's why, well, white has some different moves. Bishop g2 is one of those moves, and black can, as one of the options, can just play king f8. Well, pawn on d5 is hanging. Let's say bishop f4, bishop g6. Very sharp position, but strategically, I would say structurally, black is having actually a better structure. For the moment, he's pawn down, but very likely black will manage to get the pawn back. For instance, if knight g3, then black can already take the pawn on h4, and very risky play for white. I mean, if you decide to play this variation with white, you really need to analyze it well. There is a fair chance just to get worse here. Also, if you don't know it, very well and move per move. Otherwise, after c5, another option is to play bishop e3. The idea is that after knight c6, white is trying to take on c5, knight takes c5, knight d4. By the way, knight f3 mate was threatening. So knight d4, knight d7, b4 is extremely complicated, sharp position. But here, that looks quite promising for white. But I think after bishop e3, black can just take on d4, knight takes d4, knight c6. And it seems that according to theory, black is perfectly fine here. So all in all, knight c3 is an interesting line. I can recommend you to play it with white against someone who you think might not be very well prepared here, because the sort of price of each move, so to say, here is very high. So if black doesn't know exactly how to face it, he can really get into trouble very quickly. But objectively, probably black is fine in more than one way. And then we come to another move which became very popular nowadays, which is h4. That is a dangerous move, probably second best after knight f3, bishop e2, after the main line, and it's still not clear if black fully manages to equalize here or not. I myself have played it in the decisive game of the World Championship match against Peter Leka, when I needed to win, so I decided to play this aggressive line against Caro Kann, and actually I managed finally to win this game. At that time, this move was quite rare. Now it's almost the main line, so many games of top players on h4. So the idea is that, of course, now e6 is just not working, because after g4, black is simply losing his bishop. Then there are two ways normally to deal with h4, so whether to play h6 or h5. H5 is much more principle, and most of the players play in h5 here. But h6 is not too bad. That's actually what Peter Leka played against me, and I think I just wanted to get out of theory. I went some knight d2, e6, knight b3 here. If I remember well, I got nothing. It was just a complicated game, but managed to win at the end of the day. But the principal move is g4. So the very important idea is that now already playing the same fashion, let's say bishop e4, bishop h7, and after e6, now already the e6 is extremely dangerous. Yeah, because first of all, black cannot take on f7 with a bishop after queen d6. Yeah, and fe is always awfully dangerous, because there is let's say bishop d3, and it's actually difficult to develop simply. So, and after queen d6, white can take on f7, king takes f7 and f4, followed by knight f3. Probably this is not advisable for black. Knight will land on e5, very dangerous. So after g4, usually black plays bishop d7, and now white has two prosperous options. One is just to play like this, knight c3, bishop e3, very interesting. But even simply strategical positional way of playing, which is h5, is also, not easy for black, because e6, f4, c5, c3. Looks strange, looks a bit, like white is only moving pawns, all his pieces are still on the first rank. Well, I have to admit that white, same goes for black also. For the moment, knight, let's say queen b6, knight f3, knight c6, but it's very important that white gain this space on the king side. So basically all he needs now is to develop his pieces, and then this space on the king side will be a very important factor of the position. And white can try to do it via different, for instance, rook h2, strange move, but makes a lot of sense, protecting the pawn on b2 and then trying to develop with bishop e3, and even king f2, let's say f6, king g3, even playing like this, very original way of playing. But actually, if black doesn't manage to get some quick play, and I don't really see how, then strategically his position is very dangerous. So h6 is not so clear playable, but white has some ideas here, definitely. That's why h5 is usually played now. And but now in many lines the g5 square becomes weak, and in all those variations after bishop d3 or c4, which are two main moves now, well, without h4 h5 those moves are totally harmless, but here it's already a different story. So let's say c4, as I mentioned already, it's if you want to play this concept, then play it here with h4 h5. e6, it's more dangerous than without h4 h5, but still probably black is okay. So knight c3, bishop g5 is another option, queen b6, queen d2, and now I think that c5 is doing fine. I mean, it's a very direct move, but seems that black is doing okay here. You need to check it, of course, with the computer, but probably that is the best way to counter bishop g5. And after knight c3, usually knight e7 is what black plays. But again, this concept of playing bishop b4, as I've mentioned earlier, it's quite interesting. I quite like this. It might be perfectly fine. Usually the game develops in this way, like black is playing knight e7, bishop to g5. You see that is a difference. Bishop can find a good place on g5. But still, after queen b6, queen d2, knight d7, then black is trying to play f6, a very complicated position. Let's say knight f3, f6, bishop f4, knight g6. I think black, at least in computer games, has good statistics here and extremely complicated double-edged position, but I don't think white is any better here. So the main move now is bishop d3, and that is a subject of a serious discussion in the last couple of years. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. So the main idea is that now after e6, which is of course a very logical move, white has bishop g5, and it's not totally clear if the assessment of this position, but now many of black players are trying to avoid it. So the idea is that after let's say black has two different ways of playing. One is queen a5 check, knight d2. You see that bishop on g5 is very annoying. It's really bothering black's development. So queen a6 is a very typical move for black now, just asking where the queen will go, the white's queen, because exchanging queens in this type of position is always fine for black. But then c4 comes, and very sharp variations like bishop b4, b3, and c5, and there are many games on top level here. Yeah, you need to check it with a computer. I think that according to the latest state of theory, black is having just enough to equalize, but it can always change. I mean, this assessment, because position is very complicated. And then another way of playing is queen b6, but then knight d2 is an issue, c5, and very important c4. And again, there are some discussions, theoretical discussions here. Maybe position is not so clear, but white definitely has some initiative. It's easier to play with white, so if you want to go for it, this line with black, you need to be very well prepared. That's why maybe I can recommend you to play queen a5 check if you don't want to, to play kind of tricky, risky positions after e6. That is more solid, but still white. Also for white, he can have some chances for opening advantage. So usually knight d2 now. The idea is that black is trying not to allow this bishop g5 knight d2 setup. So here, whether you play bishop d2, whether knight d2. So if bishop d2, then queen a6, and now already c4 doesn't work. So if black manages next e6, he will be perfectly fine. So the best try for white is to play e6 here. This very also typical pawn sacrifice. Queen takes d3, ef check, king f7, c d3. Then black has this weak squares g5, e5, but knight d7, knight f3, and now knight h6 is a good move, trying to put the knight on f5. Then black follows with g6, bishop g7. Of course, it's a bit tricky. There is some knight g5 check, knight e6 ideas. But it seems that there were some games here, and black has enough to equalize in this position. And otherwise, after knight d2, now already queen a6, e6, the same position is already not good. White is already better because it's very important tempi. He will get one d knight to f3, another knight to h3, g5, and this endgame is already very dangerous. But after knight d2, black already plays e6, and let's say knight f3 or knight e2. Let's say knight f3, both moves are possible with the idea of queen a6, c4. Then black maybe can try to play knight h6, followed by knight f5, and it's a very complicated position. White definitely has some chances. It's a very serious line, very interesting line for white, so I would recommend you to study it. All white players, it is prosperous. I'm sure black should be able to equalize with a very accurate play, but there are lots of interesting ideas for white here. And so with black, for black players, that is one of the important lines. Of course, on top of knight f3, bishop e2 variation, where you really need to know exactly what you do and to be very well prepared, because the position can get very dangerous here for black. So that is probably the best try for white, h4, of all what I've mentioned earlier after e5, bishop f5, and now we are going to move to the main line, which is knight f3, e6, bishop e2. And finally, let us move to the knight f3, e6, bishop e2 system, the most popular choice among top players, grandmasters. So the idea is, White's idea is that he just finishes development and having a certain, so he's not trying to win by force, so to say, and using the space advantage, he just wants to, and a certain advantage in development. So whether if black trying to play c5 quickly, then he wants to use some development advantage to start to break in the center, or another plan which black has is just developing slowly, delaying c5 for better times, but then white wants to use his space advantage and just most of the time starting slowly his play on the king side. And the black's main problem when he chooses that plan, trying to play knight e7, h6, knight d7, is that it's not easy to finish his development and to castle. Yes, there is a lack of space for his light pieces. So now let's check what are the options. Sometimes black plays knight d7 here. I don't see any advantages of starting with knight d7, frankly. Maybe there are some kind of original move orders where knight on d7 starting with this move makes a difference, but normally black is trying to play whether knight e7, whether c5. So there are two concepts, one is to try to play for c5, then the play gets usually very direct and requires lots of concrete knowledge. Some very sharp and long variations appear very often, and you need to know them extremely well. Because again, as the c5, black is lacking development, so we have to really be careful not to get into big trouble very quickly out of the opening. But let's start with the slow plan, knight e7. So I can advise the Caro Kann players who wants just a strategical slow game, probably to choose this plan, knight e7, castles. Sometimes black is playing knight e7 in order to play after castle c5 still. Sometimes that is the case. I will explain you why? What's the difference? Most of the time, knight e7 is played in order just to continue h6 and then a slow game. But there is a point also in this move order, knight e7, c5. We will come back to this a bit later. That's why from time to time white starts with c3. In general, there are really many delicate move orders, subtle move orders in this variation, which I must admit, since I haven't really played this line with either color, so I cannot, I would not pretend that I understand all the nuances and details, of all those move orders, but still, I think I managed to catch at least some of it, and I will try to explain as I see it. So c3, the idea is that now c5 is not working well, at least because black can take on c5 and then protect this pawn via b4. So that's an idea. So actually c3 makes only sense if you are, as white, is afraid to you don't want to allow this variation, castle c5, because if black plays h6, then there is no hurry at all to start to play with c3. But some players, they don't want to give this knight e7, c5 line, so they start with c3. Black is playing knight d7, now castle. Well, the thing is that with a knight on d7, c5 is already here, is a bit dangerous because of bishop e3, even though still it's actually playable. It's not so clear, but normally, as I understand now, black would most often black plays h6, and then white continues with his play knight bd2, or sometimes a4, a5. So, but as we will see in the main line after castles h6, it's not quite clear if c3 is such a useful move. So, more principle for white is to castle, to be ready to face c5 with some concrete play. And in case of h6, again, c3 and a4 is possible, but usually best players now in the world are trying to play like this. So they play knight d2, knight d7, and then most of the time trying to put the knight on b3 here. Another plan is, as I've mentioned already, c3. So if c5 now, for instance, takes a knight d4, probably is a bit dangerous for black. But you have to be here, you have to really feel all those move orders, because in some situations, in some variations, something is a little bit different, and then this is not dangerous. Yeah, in some lines, if we have different move orders, this dc knight d4 is dangerous. So here, for some reason, it is dangerous. So in this particular position, better for black, better is just to play bishop h7. So what is black's plan? Let's say white is playing a4. So I guess after playing h6, bishop h7, probably black already is not really planning to play c5 too early. And for instance, one of the possible plans is to try to develop like this, so to play knight g6. Also, black can always try to play a5 and wait for what white is going to do. Quite often, white starts some offense on the king side, maybe even playing b4. So usually knight g6 immediately is played, and now one of the many possible plans is to play, let's say, knight b3, bishop e7, bishop e3, then black castles, and sometimes he wants to play f6. White can put the bishop on d3. Very complicated strategical position where, c5 is not easy to manage. Maybe it's objectively a bit better for white, most probably, because he has more space and he managed to stop c5, f6. For the time being, but black is also very solid. It's playable for black. Or another idea is, what is even more popular now, is to try to play knight b3 here without c3. Without playing c3. So the idea is that, for instance, if bishop h7, white very often now is choosing this plan, playing bishop d2. The thing is that he wants to play bishop b4 sometimes. For instance, g5 is one of the possible options in this position, quite a typical maneuver. So maybe now already even bishop b4 can be quite dangerous. Well, white can also play knight e1 is another typical move. But maybe bishop b4 is also an option. So let's say bishop d2, knight g6. If black is trying to do the same, then white doesn't really need so much c3. So one plan is to play a4, let's say, put the pawn on a5 and bishop d3. Or also sometimes white is playing rook c1, bishop e7, c4. Another plan here, then sometimes followed by knight a5. Of course, black's is lacking space a bit, and probably white is slightly better here. That's why after knight b3, I think now black has many also useful waiting moves like queen c7, but I saw strong players are trying to play this setup, trying to go g5, maybe followed by bishop g7, castle f6, but then white can, try to play bishop d2, still the same idea. Let's say if bishop g7, now definitely bishop b4 might be an issue. And a5, a4, and then sometimes trying c4. Or another interesting plan, which is very typical also in these positions, especially once black plays g5, is to go knight e1, and then sometimes f4, bishop h5 to start some play on the king side, even though black's position also is very solid and black has his counter chances here. All in all, it's an extremely complicated strategical position. If black decides to play this kind of slow setup, most probably, if white knows very well what he is doing and have a good feeling for the position, he can pose some problems to black. But it's definitely playable for black. Very rich position, and I would say that a player who feels it better, who understands it better, would prevail. I mean, there are not so many forced lines. It's more about strategical ideas and understanding, of typical positions after this knight e7, h6. But after, let's say, knight e7 castle, c5 is a serious move. I will explain you why not immediately c5. I mean, of course, bishop e2, c5 is also an option, definitely. But here the main move now is bishop e3, which makes black, not actually avoid playing knight e7, because then d takes e5 is a problem. Yes, so that's why black sometimes play knight e7. Of course, now bishop e3 is not so good because bishop is doing nothing on e3 unless black plays c5. And otherwise, if castle, some players they play c5 here already. Because after dc, black is in time to get back the pawn, playing knight ec6, bishop e3, knight d7. Trying to take on c5, and of course it would be just perfectly fine for black, sorry. But white has some direct play like c4, dc4, knight a3, for instance. Here is one of the options. So bishop takes c4. It's an important line to study. I think in the modern state of theory, black is fine here. But after c5, actually, this variation is not refuted at all. It's a very solid variation, and maybe it's a very interesting option for black to play, to good chances to equalize. But you need to know some quite a few lines, because the game gets very direct. c4, knight bc6, and now there are a lot of moves, big theory here. For instance, knight a3 is one of the moves. So you see, white has quite a serious lead in development. I mean, it doesn't have any strategical advantage, but definitely much better development. And trying to make use of it, playing very aggressive and open up the center. So knight a3, for instance, I think the main line goes like this, a6, now dc5, let's say d4, queen a4. I think it's one of the quite important position. Very, very complicated, very sharp, but maybe it's in white's favor, can be. Needs to be checked with powerful engines. And another way of playing is d takes c5. Now also d4 is an option, but I think that currently queen b3 is posing problems to black, because let's say queen d7, rook d1, knight g6, knight c3. You see, very sharp, very unbalanced position. Of course, if you just both players are just playing it over the board, then I would say it's simply totally unclear, but otherwise, let's say if one of the players is very well prepared here and another one is not, then it's a totally different story. So, of course, on the top professional level, the preparation here is very important, because the position is extremely sharp. But actually, after c4, knight bc6, if dc5, dc4 seems to be the main line now, and bishop takes e4, knight g6, bishop e3, for instance, bishop e7. And there was a recent game, I think, quite recent, Vashila Graf against Firouzja, I think in YKNZ 2021. White was pressing a bit at some point, white was better, but black always have counter chances in this position, and finally game ended in a draw. So, okay, c5 is a serious option, which has to be analyzed very carefully. So, and then another way of playing is c5 immediate. Actually, I think it is, according to the nowadays theory, it's doing fine. I mean, there is no advantage for white, but it requires very, very deep preparation, lots of very sharp force lines. So, very principled move, but you better study it carefully if you are black. So now the thing is bishop e3 is what most of top players are playing now, because if you castle first, then knight c6. Black is in time to play knight c6, and it seems that there is nothing better for white than to play c3, but c3 is not in the spirit of this variation. Normally, you have to meet c5 with c4 with some very direct play. I mean, here c3, still it has some venom, because the idea is that in case of cd4, which is a logical move, by the way, I would consider some kind of waiting moves like rook c8 or a6 even might be interesting to try. Because the idea, why? Because after cd, of course, the white's idea is to take with a knight on d4. So it's kind of direct idea. That's why maybe some useful waiting move can also make sense. And because if cd4, then black just plays knight g7, and he has no problem in this structure. One of the typical ideas here is, let's say, in case of knight c3, well, I guess a bishop g4 is a very logical move. Trying to go knight f5 probably must be fine for black. But just to show you one of the typical ideas here is to play knight c8. This strange maneuver, but that opens up the diagonal. So black is going to play bishop e7 next, then he's going to castle, knight goes to b6 and rook c8, and knight gets into the play on the queen side. So cd4 all in all is not dangerous, but knight takes d4, it poses some problems for black, even though not that much. I mean, black is very close to equalize. Knight e7, this is the main theoretical line, so white takes the bishop, playing bishop d3, cannot take the pawn on e5, of course, now. g6, and there are few games here. Maybe white is very, very little bit better, maybe nominally better. So black still has to be careful, but I think with the accurate play, shouldn't be anything special. For instance, there was a game, I think, Carlsen, Hare Krishna, Queen e2, Bishop g7, f4, and then black castles. And of course, there is a strategical danger, but black is quickly playing f6, opening up the diagonal. I think Magnus managed to win this game, but didn't have much out of the opening. I think it's very close to equal. That is why actually Bishop e3 is the main line. Because again, now knight e7 is not working because of dc5. Same goes for knight c6, dc5. And it's difficult for black to get back this pawn. And after knight e7, I think knight c3, knight g6, and knight d4 is very strong, and white is simply better here. So both those moves are not satisfactory. Then what else? There is another way to protect this pawn is to play knight d7 first, castles knight e7, which is also, it's not refuted, but white has quite some options here. For instance, dc5, knight c6, this is again transposition to the line which I've mentioned earlier. For instance, knight a3, and this is I think this is a quite important theoretical position, which is, I think black is just in time to equalize here. Okay, white is getting his knight to d6, it's powerful knight, but black has no weaknesses, and You can check the theory, the games here. I think it's finally black found a very precise way to equalize. But maybe here c4 is already more dangerous, dc, and now, for instance, knight c3. Well, it's a very sharp position. Again, of course, it's easier to play it with white because it has, some initiative development, better development. But black is very solid. In general, black has lots of resources. Here, it's just that I can strongly recommend you, if you want to play it black, to study it, not to play it over the board because it's difficult, especially against a prepared opponent. So all in all, after bishop e3, there are two lines now which are considered to be the best for black. One is more quiet, I would say. It's cd4, knight d4, knight e7. And according to the state of theory nowadays, it seems that white has different tries, but all in all, black is seemingly holding it well at the moment. For instance, c4, knight bc6, queen a4, a6 is the best move according to theory. Or let's say if castle, knight bc6, bishop b5, I think this is the latest trend. So a6, bishop takes c6 check, bc6, c4. Of course, strategically, black is doing fantastically. He's just better strategically, but it's just such a lack of development, so makes situation much less rosy. But still, I think queen d7 is the main line, and you need to study here the theory. I think black is very close to equalize. But another very principal move is queen b6, and now this is the most maybe important line after c5, because it's very important. I mean, the real assessment final of this position, which is not yet clear, even with the powerful engines nowadays. Situation is not totally clarified yet after queen b6. So the main line here goes knight c3. Of course, this is very risky for black, but also very direct. Knight c3, knight c6, queen b2 is just bad because of queen b1. Not an easy move to find, but it's already proven that black is in big trouble after queen b1. If takes, and then just this lack of development is killing black. So queen takes b2 is a mistake. Black should play knight c6, castles. Only here queen take b2 already works. And now, for instance, this really, you have to study this variation. There is no strategy here. It's just a very, very concrete play move per move. I mean, you really need to, especially playing black, but also white, because there is a risk to get worse with white as well. But you need really to study it from A to Z, to be sure. But it seems to me that according to the modern state of theory, black is holding here. I mean, I can just show you the main line, queen e1. Don't ask me why. All those moves are very difficult to find over the board. But, of course, machines helped a lot developing the theory of this variation. So cd4, bishop d4, knight d4, knight d4, bishop b4. And now, for instance, one possible variation is rook b1, bishop takes c3, rook b2, take on e1, take b6. And it looks scary for black, but seemingly he manages to hold here, even though, of course, you need to study more. White, I mean, to check, white has quite a number of different tries in this position, but it seems that black is able to equalize. Or another, which is more popular now, is to play knight db5, bishop a5. Of course, you would never play this position with black without powerful computers backing you, because it looks terrible. But who we are, to argue with machines. And it seems that they managed to hold here with black after rook b1, queen takes c2, rook c1, queen b2, and so on and so on. Just the beginning of the series. So again, this line you can only play with black. But also with white, especially with black, because it's so dangerous. Only in case if you are extremely well prepared here and you really analyze it well. But if it works, then it's very difficult for white, and then this old system with bishop e2 is under pressure because of c5 and very direct play. So all in all, what can I say about Caro Kann? Just let's summarize it. I think we studied all the lines already. I tried to show you typical ideas, some basic theory. I mean, the directions, the most important directions for both colors in this complicated and actually very popular nowadays opening. I think that what are the advantages of for black to play this opening? First of all, it's very solid. It's strategically very sound. You just most of the time you have only the development problems, but strategically you don't have bad pieces, or weaknesses or pawn weaknesses. That is definitely a plus. Also, the plus is that at least according to the modern, standing of Caro Kann, there is no clear way for white to get any advantage in any line. That is good. The minuses are that the main minus is that white has, and that is the plus for white, obviously, that white has a huge choice of different systems, and all of those systems are, many of them have totally different nature. So it's in a way it's white who is choosing the type of game he wants to have. So whether, let's say, one story, you see, let's say d4, d5, so e5 is one story, it's one type of game. Even after, let's say, after bishop e5, he can try to play knight c3, g4, very tactical or very positional, with knight f3, bishop e2. So then another knight d2, for instance, d, knight e4 is a totally different type of game, more positional. So black has to be ready for this. Then another story is f3, again a different type of position. Then this type of position, e d c d, bishop d3, for instance. That's already a totally different story. So that is something which is maybe a bit difficult for black. That black has to know very well the theory, the basic ideas of each line, and has to be ready to play very different types of positions in Caro Kann, while white can just choose, play very safe, or maybe sharper, or forcing lines, or just complicated, let's say, positions after f3. So white has a choice. And also what is good for white, that as you've seen, there is a choice. Many lines are not sterilized, I would say, that like f3 or even knight f3, knight c3. There is still life in those lines, something to search, something to analyze and to fight for advantage. But in general, it's a very solid opening, c6. I kind of like it with black. If I would have been still playing chess, maybe I wouldn't been playing this c6, because as you've seen in many positions, black has some counter chances. So white, in order to fight for advantage, needs to go to strategically complicated positions where black can also outplay his opponent. So for now, I think we finish all kind of side openings, as I call it. I think e4, e5, and e4, c5 are, of course, the two major blocks of openings. So I think we finished with every other possible opening, like French, Caro Kann, Alekhine defense, Pirc, Scandinavian.